So you're a Gmail power user and you're probably already using labels. But do you know that there are 3 ways to create new labels? I'm going to show you those 3 different ways in this video. And when I'm talking about labels, I'm talking about your personal labels. These are the labels here under the system labels. And your personal labels can be used to help you organize and filter your messages. One way to create a new label is from the Labels area within your Mail settings. So I'll navigate to Mail settings. I'll click on the Labels tab. Here are my system labels, and here are my personal labels. So to create a new label, I'll just select Create a New Label, and I'll enter the new label name. This is called Quarantine. Okay, so I've created that new label, and there it is. It shows up here on the left-hand side. Now this label will also appear to me when I select a message and I go to my label drop-down menu. I see I can select that new label. The label also appears to me when I'm in the message and I click on the label drop-down menu or the move to drop-down menu. So that was one way to create a new label. Another way to create a new label is to select a message. By clicking on the check mark to the left of the message, you can also select multiple messages. Then from the Labels drop-down menu, I'll choose Create New, and now I can enter a new label name. I'm going to call that label Follow Up, and that label was applied to these 2 messages. Okay, and the third way to create a new label is when you have the message open. From the Label drop-down menu, you can create a new label, select Create New. We're going to be talking about nested labels in another movie, and I'll call this label Invitation. So those are the 3 ways to create new labels. So you can do it when the message is open, from the conversation list, or from the Manage Labels area of your Mail settings. How about color coding these labels? By default, if you don't put a color on the label, it's just going to have this sort of light gray background and this darker text here. I enjoy adding colors to labels. It helps them stand out. I also sometimes like using colors to help symbolize what the label is. So for example, for this priority label, a color that's priority is probably red. So I clicked on the color swatch and this showed me my label choices. So I'm going to make that red. And I'll set the color there. For calendar, because calendar is a blue icon, I'm actually going to make these blue. I've got this Linda Videos label, and I'd like to give this a custom color, meaning that it's not going to be one of these standard colors. I'm going to create a color that goes with Linda. So maybe I'll use some of the colors from the Linda logo. So I choose Add Custom Color. I'm going to go ahead and give this a yellow background color, and the text color will be black. And I can play around with that. I can choose another shade of yellow or this bright yellow. I think this yellow looked the best. Let's go back to black text color and I click apply, and I've now just created a custom color. So now when I add this Linda Videos tag, it kind of looks like the Linda color. So that's fun if you're working with a certain brand or maybe a university to create labels that match their colors. At any time, you can change the color of a label by just choosing a new label color or adding a new custom color. I do want to point out that when you have a label and that label has sub-labels, when you change the top label color, you will be prompted to set the color just for the top level label or all of the sub-labels. So if I set the color for all of the sub-labels, then photos and all of the sub-labels of photos will have this pink color. So those are the 3 ways to create labels and change label colors. If you come from a background of using Outlook or another desktop-based application, you're probably used to a folder and subfolder, what we call a nested folder structure, and maybe you want the same thing with your labels. So notice these are my top level labels, and some of my labels have sub-labels. So under photo, I've got meeting and retreat, which are sub-labels of photos. So if I were to apply this sub-label, I could just drag this onto a message. Now notice how it appears. The tag looks like photos/retreat, so the top level label name / the sub-label name. And then I could click on the sub-label to see the messages in here. So how did I create these sub-labels in the first place? Before the summer of 2011, you actually had to enable a special lab called Nested Labels. You don't need to do that anymore. Nested Labels is just part of Gmail. It's a lab that graduated to become a full feature of Gmail. So to create a nested label, just go to create a new label. So I'll choose create new. Now, if I want to create a new nested label, I will create the new label name. I'm going to call this vacation. Then I'll select nest label under, and I'll choose what's called the parent. So the label does need to already exist. So I'm going to nest this under photos. So I've now created another sublabel of photos. Now, what happens if you don't even have the parent label yet? Well, first you should create the parent label. So I'm going to create a new parent label. Just for this example, I'll call it parent. And now I can create the children labels under parent. One way to do that is choosing labels and create new. And then I could choose child 1. And of course, I would nest that under parent. There it is in the list because we've already created it. Another way to create what's called a child label is to click on the color swatch to the right of the parent name, and then from here I can choose add sublabel. So that's another way to add sublabel. See, parent is already selected here, and this will be child 2. So that's another way to create a sub-label. Again, I just clicked on the color swatch and I can choose add sub-label. You don't have to stop at one level of sub-labels. I could even add a sub-label under child 2. Let's call this grandchild 1. So now we've got 3 levels of nesting. Notice what this label looks like when I actually apply it. It has parent and then / ... and then ends in grandchild. So you don't see the whole thing, but if you hover your mouse over it, I see the whole structure there. Parent / child 2 / grandchild 1. Kind of technical, but it's just showing you that you can have multiple sublabels. I urge you not to get too label happy. Really, the best way to find your messages are through the search capability instead of doing the hunting and pecking and opening up all these labels. It's a lot faster to just use search. But you do have this option of nested labels available to you if you want to use it. So let's talk about keyboard shortcuts and labels. There are some keyboard shortcuts you can use to quickly label a message. So let's say we've got a label open. If I want to apply a label to this message using keyboard shortcuts, well, first I press the letter L, and that opens up the label menu. Then I can use the arrow keys to select the label I want to apply. So I want to apply photos to this label. Notice photos is highlighted there. I just press enter and the photo label is added to this email. The same can be true when a message is selected. So if I select a message here and then press L, I can then choose the label. I pressed Q actually to quickly see that quarantine label, and I just applied the quarantine label. You can also use a keyboard shortcut to get to the move to command. The move to command applies a label and archives the message at the same time. Why don't I go ahead and remove the quarantine label? I'll do it again, this time using the keyboard shortcut V. So V opens up the move to drop-down menu. And I will send this to the quarantine and archive the message. Now when I go into the quarantine label, I do see that message there that I just labeled. Great. Okay, if you just want to use keyboard shortcuts to quickly get to a label or to view a certain label, what you would do is you would press the / which takes you to the search bar. So here I am, my cursor is now active in the search box. And then I just type the label name. So I'll start to type quarantine and notice it appears here. And I can just select quarantine, press enter, and now I'm looking at the quarantine label. Let's try that again. So here I am in my mailbox. I want to go into a certain label and take a look in there. I press the /, then I type the label name. I select Linda Videos, and there I am inside that label. Notice the label's highlighted over here. So again, the keyboard shortcuts are L brings up the label drop-down menu so you can select a label. V brings up the move to drop-down menu where you can apply a label and archive the video. And if you just want to search for a label or view a label, just press the /, which puts you in the search mail area, and then type the label name. So you've been using labels for quite some time and now you have a lot of labels. Maybe you want to make some changes to those labels, like editing the name of the label or hiding the label from the left-hand side, or maybe just removing the label altogether. So let's talk about that. First, let's look at renaming a label. Two ways to do that. Highlight the label, click on the color swatch here, and then scroll down and there is an edit button. I'll choose edit. And then I can change the label name. I'm going to call this Adult Education. I'll click Save, and the new label name has been changed. One thing to note, notice that this @Cal label appears at the top of my list. Your labels appear in alphabetical order. If you need a label name to be at the top of the list, add a symbol like the @ symbol or a number, and that will make the label appear on top of the other labels. Another way to rename the label is to go into your Manage Label area, click on the label. I'm going to do another one of those @ symbols. So I'll add an @ here, then click away, and now the label has been updated. It's also moved up a bit. So that's how you change a label name. The benefits of a label showing in the left-hand side is that you can quickly give it a color, you can quickly apply it by dragging and dropping it onto a message. You can click on it to see the contents. But if the label is a label you don't use that often, it's just taking up space, you can hide it from showing up in this list. And you do that by going again into Labels and Manage Labels. And then here, I can decide to hide this from the label list. Look what happens when I decide to hide Adult Education. It no longer shows up. So I've hidden Adult Education, got myself some screen real estate back. I can still use that label. It still appears in the label drop-down list. It just doesn't appear in this label list here. The other thing you can do is you can prevent the label from showing up in the message list. So maybe this Photos Retreat label, it's a little long. I want to be able to apply it to messages, but I don't want to see it here. I don't have a lot of screen real estate. So I will select the label and I'll choose Hide, so it doesn't show in the message list. Now the label has still been applied. It's just that it doesn't show on the name of the label. And some people choose to do that if they've got really long label names. And finally, let's talk about removing labels. So if you need to remove a label, you can do that by going into the Manage Label. And if I choose a label, I select Remove. This dialog box comes up so I can delete the label. Now note, the label has been deleted. However, the conversations it was applied to, those still exist in my all mail area. So they'll be in all mail. I can search for those messages. It's just that they'll no longer have that label. So it's not like deleting a folder in Outlook where you would delete all the messages in it. You're just removing the label. The message still exists in your all mail or in your archive.